Thank God it's Friday. Good morning and thanks for joining us on TBC Breakfast. I am Mike Okwache and I have my colleague Kemi Oladeyemo with me in the house. Kemi, good morning. Kemi, good morning.
Hey, Mike. Good
morning.
Good
to see you. Great.
Thank God it's Friday.
Oh, thank God it's Friday. All right, there's an interesting one at that, but let's hit the ground running already. The long-awaited ministerial list of President Bola Tinubu was finally transmitted to the Senate, beating the 60 days constitutional deadline for the submission of ministerial lists to the National Assembly. Among those on the list are the former governor of Rivers State, Nyesom Wike, and 3 other ex-governors whose names were part of the 28 nominees read by the President of the Senate, Senator Godswill Akpabio. National Assembly correspondent Tijesu Adeoye has more on this report.
The Senate suspends its standing rule to admit a special visitor into the chamber. The Chief of Staff to Mr. President, Femi Gbajabiamila, is ushered into the Senate's plenary session to present President Tinubu's list of ministerial nominees.
Reading taken.
President of the Senate, Senator Godswill Akpabio, then proceeds to call out the 28 names of the ministers designate as contained in the executive communication.
Of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1999 as amended, I am pleased to forward to the Senate for confirmation the underlisted 28 ministerial nominees. 1. Abubakar Momo, Ambassador Yusuf Maitama Chuka, CON. 3. Architect Ahmad Dangiwa. 4. Barrister Hanatu Musawa. 5. Chief Uche Naji. 6. Dr. Betta Edun.
Reacting to the content of President Tinubu's ministerial nominees, lawmakers commend the president for meeting the deadline. However, they say the screening of the nominees would not be business as usual.
I believe that by this weekend, we'll have the CVs. But I'm personally pleased with the caliber of men and women that have been nominated. But we can only conclude when we screen them. And if we find them worthy, why not? We'll confirm them. If we don't find them worthy, we're not going to confirm them.
Our business is to screen them, and then those who will be able to pass our screening should take a bow.
All these names you submitted, what are they going to do? Let's not approve people to become ministers and you take square pegs and put in round holes. We want to match them with their capacities.
The Senate has a tradition that if you were once a senator, you would have been screened to become a senator, and so that suffices. But in any case, it doesn't stop any senator from asking the relevant questions where it becomes necessary.
At the nick of time, President Bola Tinubu's ministerial list got to the National Assembly, but the wait is not over yet as more names will be sent in due course. Also, the ball is now in the court of the Senate to screen these ministers and allow President Tinubu inaugurate the Federal Executive Council. Tijesu Adeoye, TBC News, Abuja.
All right, joining us now to discuss this via Zoom is political analyst Micheal Oluwagbemi joining us from Abuja. It's nice to have you join us this morning, Micheal.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
Great. Now, a lot of Nigerians before now had thought that the ministerial list would have been submitted or the issues of ministers would have been dusted long before now because of the personality of the president, Tinubu, being someone who starts things and does things as the case may be. But it had to wait until it was almost the deadline before we saw part of the list of ministries or ministers, nominees, and so on. I wonder what you make of this. What was your expectation, or do you feel everything is in order?
Good morning again to you and your viewers for the opportunity to, of course, discuss the topic. I think the deadline that had been set for the National Assembly, once again, had been met. I believe that constitutional amendment was based on prior experience that have associated the everly more increasingly complicated political scene and the calculations that presidents have to make to choose their minister, leading to more delays as we go along in this democratic experience. I comment.
Okay. I believe the signal will be back and we have him, Micheal Oluwagbemi. We're just trying to lay the foundation regarding the list of nominees for ministers that has just been submitted to the... Okay, I understand he's back. Micheal, you're back on now. Go ahead.
Yes. I was saying that the list we know does not entirely and sufficiently satisfy completely the requirements, constitutional requirements for that has been set, which is one minister per state. There are a couple of states that actually have 2 nominees, and there are a lot of more states that do not have any nominees at all. So we know that we are still expecting more, and I think the president will respond to that accordingly.
We also noticed that in this preliminary list that the president sent into the Senate, there were no portfolios attached. Of course, the presidency has given some form of rationale. Honorable Gbajabiamila saying even though it would have been best if portfolios were attached, but the rationale is that these people should be able to work in any capacity and that the prerogative is on the president. But what's your take on the fact that there were no portfolios attached to these names so far?
I think that it would not have been unconstitutional to provide portfolio indication because, again, it's up to the president also to reassign portfolio as he sees fit. I think some kind of portfolio indication and guidance could help the National Assembly in the process of screening and in the process of asking questions and in the process of identifying the capacity of specific nominees for the positions for which they might have been nominated. I think that adding portfolios might have probably enhanced the process of the legislative screening that is now supposed to be undertaken. The National Assembly members are now left to guesstimate. Oh, I was saying that the National Assembly definitely will benefit from portfolio assignments. I do not think it is unconstitutional to assign portfolio, even though, of course, it's also not unconstitutional not to assign portfolio. A portfolio assignment allows the National Assembly to ask questions that are relevant to those people who have been called upon to actually be screened. So I think assigning portfolio is always a good idea, even though almost nearly all previous ministerial nominees have not had portfolio assigned to them.
All right. We see that it's just 28 names that were sent. The chief of staff to the president has said that the remaining names of about 13 will still be sent later on. Of course, the Constitution says the list of nominees should be sent not later than 60 days. Now, if half of the list or part of the list was sent and part is still left, would it constitute a breach of the Constitution or is still in order so long as some names were sent in the first instance?
Like I said, when you first asked me the question, I had indicated that it's a technical, the president technically met the requirement, which is that there's a deadline to submit a list. It does not say there's a deadline to submit all the potential ministers. The president can decide to meet his other constitutional requirements as he goes along. So I think it's a technical issue. I don't think that there's an absolute breach. And I think that the president definitely will come back with a second batch of lists, as already has been indicated by those in the system.
Well, what we do know for certain is that there's no more speculation as to the involvement, so to speak, of former governor Nyesom Wike. He and about 3 other former governors are in the list so far. But of course, Wike being a former governor of the People's Democratic Party, with the controversies that he garnered during the just concluded elections. But, this is rather unprecedented. And what do you make of his name included in the list so far, and what value he could be bringing to the Tinubu administration?
Yeah, I think that the need to reward those people who played a key role in the president's emergence as the president made the addition of the like of former Governor Wike inevitable. It was very clear that he was a very powerful bloc within the opposition that stood his ground, and thereby made the emergence of President Tinubu an ultimate reality. And so he's being part of the list is not surprising, to say the least. I think most political analysts expected this to be so. Some other names were a little surprising, especially, for example, the nominee from Oyo State, who actually ran on the ticket of the a minority opposition party in that state in this election, but did not play a major role in the emergence of President Tinubu in Oyo State. So I think that Governor Wike on the list, I was not surprised. I expected it, as did many political analysts.
All right. With the list we have seen, we have about 7 female nominees already. And if you jiggle that mathematically, that's about 25%. Well, the Constitution has specified a minimum of about 10% from Section 42B when it talked about the composition of the ministerial nominees. I wonder what you make of this, how encouraging this is, or what comments you have in this regard.
Yes, I think the president so far has been very fair to the, in terms of the precedence and relative size of women in his cabinet. I would expect that it should be improved. I do not see any reason why women should not make up half of the cabinet if they make up half of the population. I also think the Beijing Convention requires 30%. So the president is trying, but it's still 5% or some short of the requirement of the Beijing Convention, which women.
I think it was 35% in the first, 35% affirmative action from the Beijing conference.
So it does.
Yeah, so it's still 10% short.
So yes, the president is still about 10% short. But the reality is that I don't see that. I don't think there's any reason why, where if 50% of the electorate are women, when we go out to vote or when we are trying to mobilize votes as a country, 50% of the people who come out will be women. There's no reason why women should not make half the cabinet. I just think there's a little bit of course, naturally male domination as we have in our political space. And so proportionally speaking, women are not as much active on the active side than on the passive side. And so 25, 35% then seem to be sufficient. But I think that improvement has been made, and improvement should continue to be made to ensure the voices of everybody in our democracy is carried along, especially those people who are responsible for putting us in office, and that will be women.
Right. And Mr. Oluwagbemi, the second bit of my question earlier about the inclusion of the likes of Honorable Nyesom Wike, the former governor, Nyesom Wike, I should say, and thankfully you added Dele of Oyo State, and that is also rather apt when you mention that he also comes from the opposition, even though he's of a minority opposition party. But the big question on many Nigerians' minds is, so what happens now if and when they get screened by the Senate? Is it likely that they remain in their parties, or would they rather go on to join the APC? What's your take?
Yeah, I don't think there's a constitutional requirement that members of the cabinet have to be members of the party. They are being sworn in as members of the cabinet of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, not the members of cabinet of the APC. I do think that the likes of Governor Wike have said and will continually said that he was not leaving his party. I do not know of the likes of Mr. Dele out of Oyo State if he plans to leave his party. It is not unusual for members of the opposition to be chosen into the cabinet. We remember the case of Chief Bola Tinubu, who was the Attorney General of the Federation under President Oluwagbemi in 1999. And actually, prior to being Attorney General, was actually the Minister of Power and Steels in the initial cabinet. And there continues to be various examples of prominent members of the opposition becoming members of the cabinet and functioning as though and not leaving their party. We in fact remember that Chief Bola Tinubu, prior to his assassination, was actually planning to go back into his party and continue his political life, despite the fact that he had served almost 4 years or maybe 3 years and some as a member of the cabinet of the People's Democratic Party, then under President Oluwagbemi.
All right. The Chief of Staff, while speaking to newsmen, mentioned that some ministries could be created, and there's the likelihood, maybe some could be merged when he used the word restructuring of some of those ministries. I wonder what you make of that, because Nigerians have been calling for the kind of a pruning, cutting down on the cost of governance. But the assumption is that if more ministries are created, then of course it's going to amount or translate to more expenses, because you're going to have more ministers, more people, more aides, and so on. But I wonder what you make of that, though.
First, I think it's within the right of the president to restructure the federal bureaucracy as he sees fit in order to deliver the mandate on which he has promised the Nigerian people during the elections. So naturally, every president tries to move things around to satisfy their own vision for how the federal civil service should work and be structured, and therefore report up to him as the president in the process of governance. On the other hand, I do not think whether you expand or you reduce the number of ministers per se, that you can expand or you can drastically reduce or increase the size or the cost of governance. I think for Nigerians, I would like to think that as a developing country, our major concern is whether you have effective and optimal governance, not so much about the cost. The size of the Nigerian government, as it were, is already quite tiny relative to the size of the economy. If you consider the fact that in other climes, the size of government spending is between 30 to 40%. On average in Africa, is between 17 and 25%. But Nigeria is spotting between 6 and 10%. So Nigeria's government is already quite small relative to the size of our economy. Our military, for example, could be a lot larger. We only have 130,000 military personnel protecting over 218 million Nigerians, which is one of the quite lowest in the world. Nigeria's military should easily be between 500,000 to 1 million people, which will mean that our military is almost times 10 of what it is today. So I do not think that reducing the number of ministers can necessarily mean that government is more effective or government is a whole lot more costly. The cost of maintaining a minister, even a junior minister as a case, even if you reduce the size of the government, you are still constrained by the constitutional requirement that you have to choose 36 ministers. And whether you make them senior minister or junior minister does not reduce the size of their aid. It does not reduce the number of cars in their convoy. It does not reduce the allowance that is due, because both a junior minister and a senior minister, because they represent one full state, are still eligible for the same allowances, the same size of personnel, and all of those kind of things. I like to think about these things first and foremost as, do we have effective governance? I think the president will try to restructure the ministries in order to be able to have effective oversight. Some people, for example, have called for splitting of the Ministry of Information and Culture, because Nigeria's culture and tourism industry have suffered a lot because it has been subsumed under the information ministry that basically just is a ministry for government information, public information and propaganda. And you cannot and should not subsume the Ministry of Tourism and Culture, which is quite large in a country like ours that could benefit quite a bit from expanding the tourism industry, exposing Nigeria's blessed potential to outsiders under such ministry. So is it a win? Are you helping to reduce the cost of governance if we subsume the Ministry of Culture and Tourism under the Ministry of Information? I do not think so. I think at the end of the day, what you want to look at is effective governance and optimization of the federal cabinet. I think that's what matters in the long run.
So we have 28 names now, about 12 or thereabout pending, but in line with the president's assurance that he would deliver a cabinet of inclusivity and or inclusion, whichever word you prefer to use, but, that as well as competence. How do these names, seem to you?
The president has a prerogative to choose his team. I think at the end of the day, he's going to choose 40 to 41 men and women who will represent his administration on the highest level. It does not mean that these people are the absolute only people that he's going to be engaging with. The reality is that he's going to have a plethora of special advisors, senior special assistants, personal assistants, senior technical advisors. He's going to continue to have chairman of boards. He's going to have members of boards. He's going to have managing directors of agencies and parastatals. He's going to have members of commission. The bureaucracy, the which the president and even the political appointment that the president himself directly makes is quite large. He's going to have ambassadors in all the missions of Nigerian missions abroad, diplomatic missions of Nigeria abroad. He's going to have high commissioners and consular generals. These people, one way or the other, represent the president. And so this layer of ministers, the cabinet, is just the first layer of direct support to the president, one way or the other. And the president is going to continue to try to fill up his cabinet, his team, in the next 4 years, as the case may be, in order to be able to deliver the mandate to the Nigerian people. So I think the president has a prerogative to choose his team, and I think by and large his team has been balanced in terms of geography, in terms of competence, in terms of who they are. I also think that this initial list, if I may, is probably what I would call the reward list, because it's going to be, seems to be the list where political favors are being rewarded. I would think that the supplemental list that we will then have subsequently will even reflect more of the technocrats than just for reward. If I may guess, but again, I'm not in the mind of the president, neither do I know the president's strategy, but by and large, I think he has a prerogative to choose his Team A, his first 11, which is what he has put forward here. And we look forward to just the government getting back to the business of governance, because by and large, if you do not have political appointees in place, it's very difficult for government business to run.
All right. The Senate has said they will be thorough in the screening process of these nominees. When some of them are former lawmakers, some of them are, and others, come from different backgrounds. In the past, we've seen the situation where those who perform in that, or those who had occupied certain offices in the past, are just given the privileges of just bow and move ahead. But the Senate is saying they're going to be thorough. I wonder what you expect when they use the word thorough in this regard.
I don't know. I think the Senate is trying to teleguide the seriousness with which they take the task of screening the cabinet as required of them by the Constitution. I think that is what they're trying to convey. When it comes to the exercise of privilege, where in terms of extra senators being asked to take a bow in the Senate, I think the tradition will largely continue. On this list, I think we have 3 extra senators, and we have 1 serving senator, Senator Umahi, who is on the list. And I think I do not expect them to be grilled by their colleagues because it's just not the tradition of the Senate. The Senate is is regarded as a gentleman's chamber, and I do not expect them to violate the gentleman rule. They will pass on their own colleagues, those who have the privilege of sitting in the hallowed chamber of the Nigerian Senate, the Red Chamber. And I think that those people will definitely, or more or less, take it back, unless they have some of their colleagues, like we saw in 2019, I think, insisted to ask 1 question. I do not think that they will be knocked out by 1 question. So if you're a senator on the list, I think by and large you should consider yourself almost already a member of the cabinet.
Well, what are your thoughts on, you know, the shakeups that we've seen in the ruling All Progressives Congress with the, excuse me, with the national chairman and the national secretary who resigned, and we also have the latest resignation from Mr. Lukman, and with this cabinet list that has been announced now, about 2 more members. The acting chairman is listed, as well as the national women leader. But with all of this, somehow it would impact on the framework, so to speak, of the ruling or progressives Congress. And happenings in the party so far has gotten many tongues wagging as to what exactly is going on. But from your observer standpoint, what do you think?
Yes, I think by and large, the making of the cabinet is not unusual, that the ranks of the political party, in terms of those people who actually ran the election, be depleted in one form or the other. So I think that it's only natural that some people feel that the skills, if the president feels that the skills they've already exhibited in managing the party during the election, and even to his emergence as the president, can be used or utilized in the cabinet. It's not unusual to see 2 or 3 or 4 of them cross over from the political party structure into the structure of the federal government. And that's what you've seen in this instance, in which case the acting national chairman and the woman leader of the party, you know, were selected as part of the cabinet. Of course, it will also mean that there will be additional opening within the party, and the party will need to have its national executive committee meet and make a decision to ratify or to nominate a new party leadership to fill the shoes of those people who are leaving. This has been the convention from time immemorial, and requirements of the constitution as well as the INEC guidelines. The party will meet, and the NEC, generally this issue of replacing members of the NEC is usually a family affair, and the president tends to have his way because it's the president's party. Once the president is in place, he is the leader of the party, and he is the one that has the mandate of not just the Nigerian people, but the mandate of the party as a flag bearer of the party to pilot the ship of the party. So he will guide in terms of the replacement in line with the party's own internal guidelines. Like I said, it's an internal family affair. The Supreme Court have made it clear that parties can't decide who their national chairman, or as the case may be, provided everybody align on some form of unanimity. But the other point of it is that once NEC approves and NEC communicates to INEC, then the new party leadership is what it is, and that's been a tradition. If you remember, and you recall the case of His Excellency Buni, who was actually a governor and was the acting national chairman of the party. The Supreme Court said the governor is the party's selection is the party's selection, and they have to live by it, and that's just what it is.
All right, that's a good place to leave it now. Thank you so much, Micheal Oluwagbemi, for your insight into all of this. We look forward to the coming days, how they will be screened, and then portfolios will be attached, and then of course we're going to talk again as we get along. Thank you.